I'm just going to basically go through effectively a 2005 to 2011 developments in renewable heat, really. So what I want to just very briefly go through drivers, talk about where we were in 2005, then talk about the programs that we had in terms of support, a little bit about some other developments in that period of time, and then just a few thoughts on where to from here. So obviously the driver we're all familiar with, and I think it was alluded to earlier by Paddy, and is the Renewable Energy Directive that's come in. We have targets nationally of 16% renewables in our gross final energy consumption, and the 10% renewables in transport. And these are sort of devolved down to national targets, which are the 12% renewable heat that Donald mentioned earlier, 40% renewable electricity, and the 10% renewable transport. So that's what we have to achieve by 2020. That's the obligation we've committed to as a nation. So in 2005 then, where were we? Well, really, biomass heating was well established in the wood industry. The sawmills were using their residues to produce their heating for their processes, as were the board mills. So they were really the only activities in terms of biomass heating. There was domestic use, obviously, as well, but generally on a small scale and probably quite inefficient as a general rule. So we started off in 2005 with what we called the pilot Bioheat program. And that ran for about 6 months, and it was targeted just at the commercial and industrial sector only. And the other thing we said was just going to be wood fuels, because there was a lot of experience in Europe with using wood fuels. There was lots of technologies. So we said wood chip, wood pellet only. We had set the capital grant at 25% of eligible costs. And we also set a minimum size. We didn't want to, that's anyway. We were really learning, and indeed we still are, but we certainly learning. We knew very little about the sector at that point. So we also set a minimum size. We didn't want to be dealing with very small boilers, so we set 60 kilowatts. So that program, which lasted, as I say, for about 6 months, supported 17 projects with a total installed capacity of almost 11 megawatts of heating. Now, you can see that there were two large projects in that process. One was a 1.8 megawatt boiler, and one was a 5.2 megawatt boiler. The balance, most of the projects were sort of 500 kilowatt or less. So that's sort of indicative of the kind of market that we saw developing. In that program, we gave out a total of about 625,000 euros in grants. Now, I also have to point out that the one large one, the 5.2, unfortunately, the company that had that project made a decision on a bigger scale to move, so that boiler isn't actually there anymore. So that was the pilot Bioheat program. And that was followed then by the reheat program, which came along in 2006, because the government decided to put some money into the renewable heat sector, and they committed money in the finance, in the budget announced in 2005 for 2006 to 2010. Now we did a little bit of research, a little bit more research through the pilot Bioheat, and we decided that the grant system needed to go up to, so we put up to 30% of the eligible costs. We had an initial budget of 26 million for this program, the reheat program. Again, we restricted it to wood pellet, wood chip only, because the experience was there, again, to bring more of that into the market and try and get more deployment of these technologies in the Irish market. The minimum size was taken away. We saw applications possibly in sports clubs and smaller scale, so we took away the minimum size requirement. But also other technologies came into the mix as well, because we're talking about renewable heat. So we're talking about bringing in heat pumps and solar thermal as well. They became part of the program. So that moved forward, and we supported programs like this. And I think it was interesting that, again, what Donald had shown earlier in terms of savings that can be achieved. You can see here in this particular example, an 80 kilowatt boiler. The dark blue is the estimated wood pellet running cost versus the estimated LPG running cost. Significant savings to be achieved there, and also CO2 savings, which is what we were certainly looking achieve. Now, when we started off with the reheat program, there was it was primarily biomass boilers that were being put in. But you would see as the program moved over the years through 2007, 8, 9, the switch started moving towards the other renewables, which was the solar thermal and the ground source heat pumps. And I suppose we need to analyse that a little bit. It could be that the costs were more significant with the biomass as opposed to these other renewable technologies for which we were giving grants as well. But there was certainly a shift in that, and in another program I'm going to mention in a few minutes, which is the domestic program. So in the reheat program, in total we supported something like 190 projects, which with a total installed capacity of somewhere of the order of 78 megawatts. Again, we had two large boilers in that program, 8 megawatt each. We had a number in the 1 megawatt, 1.2 megawatt, maybe 1.5 megawatt scale. But again, most of the boilers that we supported under the program were in that 500 and less than 500 kilowatt scale. Now, we give out only 8 million euros in grants for the whole program. And remember, we had a 26 million budget to start off with in 2006, and obviously things happened over the years. But nonetheless, the program did take some time to really gain momentum in the initial year, and I suppose that was again because of general, inexperience with biomass boilers and the fuel supply chain and other things that were factors in that. And unfortunately, as the experience was gained, other factors came into play, such as the budget was being cleaved off to other areas, number one, and number two, would-be developers were finding more and more difficult to get money for the balance of the funding. So I think these were factors that were very important in play there. Now, at the same time as the reheat program came in, the Greener Home Scheme program came in as well, and that started at about the same time, 2006 running to 2010. The supports in this case were more on an amount of money depending on the technology. For example, a biomass boiler for a domestic application might have got 2,000, 2,500 grand. That was a fixed number of money, it wasn't a percentage of the cost. And this program had an initial budget of 27 million euros. But you can see the last point there, the budget had to be augmented because this one really took off at a gallop for whatever reason. Again, it covered the three technologies, biomass boilers, ground source heat pumps, and solar thermal. And there was a huge uptake from the very off of this particular program. And in fact, I think the initial budget was committed certainly within the first year. So the budget was committed for the domestic program. The kind of, over the life of this program, which went to the end of 2010 or a little bit into 2011, we supported something like 6,100 installations, biomass installations of either stoves or boilers or stoves and back boilers. A technology, which is the one over on the right there, that was introduced more later in the program, was these what are called wood gasification boilers. I think probably the correct term is two-stage combustion, but the term that seems to be most used is this wood gasification boilers. And we supported about 171 of those. And you can see the grants under this program went to 78 million. So we had an initial budget of 27 million. But because of the uptake of this program, the grant commitment ended up being 78 million. So therefore, over the program, if you like, considering the pilot, the reheat, and the domestic, in the biomass sector, 6,100 domestic applications have been added, all wood pellet. 171 of these wood gasification boilers. And in the commercial industrial, about 210 installations, coming up to about 90 megawatts in total, have been added. So this is the kind of, this is what's happened on these programs. Obviously, as you've seen from other presenters as well, what has happened over this period is wood suppliers have started getting into the game, if you like. They're starting to bring their systems into play. So we're getting more experience than we have with wood fuel supply chains, which I think is a critical development for the future of this sector. Some other things that have happened, well, just quickly, where are we? The last report I had was the end of 2009. So you can see in terms of our targets that I mentioned earlier, we've got about 4.2% renewable heat now. We still have to get to 12%, so there's a significant additional amount of renewable heat that has to come on the market. In terms of renewable electricity, I suppose the policy people are thinking wind is going to do that, but nonetheless biomass is going to have some role in there. And renewable transport is one that's really going to have to do a lot. It's at 2% now. It's effectively got to go up by a factor of 5. So in terms of other developments in this period, we've seen wood pellet production come online in Ireland. We have deep pellet here in Kilkenny with a capacity of 70,000. Their capacity is 70,000 tons a year. And leach sawmills recently coming on as well, and there are 30,000 tons there. So there's capacity producing quality fuels in Ireland there. And we've also seen even technology being developed with Kerry dye products in Killarney, producing the dyes for actually producing the pellets. This was mentioned earlier by Paddy, and I think it's a critical development here. The Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme is up and running. It has these objectives to ensure a product that meets or exceeds the customer's expectations. And really, the second point there, giving confidence to the market, I think that was mentioned, John mentioned market confidence for other reasons, but certainly from a fuel supply point of view, it's critical that the market knows when it's going to get quality fuel when it buys a quality fuel. It wants to see some kind of a stamp on it that says, I can trust this, and this is what the WFQA is all about. So we really need to see this scheme. I think there are only, I might be wrong, but I think there's 3 registered suppliers under this scheme now. We need to see a lot more. We need to see this in every distribution. Every packet going out needs to have a mark that says this meets a certain quality standard. So that's a very important development there. Other developments, we've seen the non-wood fuels, and I think this is something that's going to be important into the future. This is an example of these straws that are now certainly on the market. This is pressed straw. This is one of the new fuels that's a non-wood fuel that is coming on the market now. And also we've seen a lot of development in miscanthus. There's been a fair bit of miscanthus grown. There have been some issues, let's say, around its use in terms of one of the main users, the co-firing of peat. There is some miscanthus going into Eden Dairy Power, but it's certainly another fuel that we need to see develop, that we need to see the market for this developing. We had, because the program was just closed, we had a program which was a miscanthus pilot demonstration program for which we had a 50% of eligible cost grant with no minimum size. It started in, I think it was mid-2010, and it's now ending at the end of, well, it's now closed. But anyway, under that program, we've 10 projects at the moment that we have offered support to. Well, in fact, we had 15 projects we offered support to, but 3 of those projects weren't able to go ahead. And I think it was because of the balance of funding. But 12 projects that I know of are still, in principle, going ahead. 2 of them are operating at this time. The total capacity under that program is 975 kilowatts. We've given something like 255,000 euros in grants. And this is one of them here. It's a 120 kilowatt boiler. I think the type of boiler here is an Ocotherm boiler, and it's feeding chipped miscanthus. This project has been operating since last year. There is another one now that has come on stream as well back in the summer. And we hope that the balance will be commissioned by the end of this month to bring on the extra capacity. So these are just some general points. The refit, which has gone through a traumatic growth phase, if you like, or birth phase, has passed through the European situation, and the department, I presume, will be making something or putting something out soon to allow applications. So that's the refit is the biomass support for renewable electricity. In terms of renewable transport, from the policymakers' perspective, I guess they've got the obligation scheme in place, and that's where they see that moving forward. But I suppose in the renewable heating and cooling, that's where at the moment there is no support policy. Our grant programs don't have any further funding, they're closed. So there needs to be something, and as was mentioned earlier, the neighbour up north and across the Irish Sea have got significant supports in place. So the policy is not in place yet, and we need some policy in that area. I suppose the next point I have there is, as I mentioned, these non-wood fuels, they are there, and we need to get them into the market, into the renewable heating and cooling market. So they're going to be an important point to play. Emissions from wood fuels, non-wood fuel combustion systems, particularly at small scale, is something that we have to be aware of. It's there, it's being considered more and more. John McFinnan of Teagasc is working on a project called Clean Biomass Combustion, which is looking at this area. Hopefully we will see some useful outcomes from that to sort of guide in how we go forward with that. And finally, the health and safety issue, we have to bear that in mind. That has been an issue that we have to take cognizance of. We have to address it. And RBBD are doing some things in that regard, basically. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.